My name is Susan Anderson, 30 years old. If you had asked me 6 days ago what the next decade of my life would look like, I would have described Sunday brunches with my husband, lazy evenings spent watching him rehearse lines on our living room couch, and maybe if he ever felt ready, a child or two running around our quiet home. I thought we were building something steady, something real. But the truth is, the ground beneath my marriage had been shifting for years, and I had been too blinded by love to feel the tremors. I met my husband when I was 23 and he was 25, a struggling actor with an earnest smile and a kind of unpolished charm that made people want to believe in him. I certainly did. When he proposed 2 years later, I felt chosen special, like I was part of his dream. I was already in my residency, then working impossible hours, drowning in debt and responsibility. But he always made me feel seen, supported, cherished. So when we married, I didn't think twice about taking on the majority of our expenses. It felt natural. He was chasing a dream. I had a stable career. We were a team. Or at least I thought we were. Over the years, I watched him fight for roles that never seemed to reflect his talent. More often than not, he was hired as an extra, a blur in the background of someone else's story. And yet he never gave up. His hope was contagious, and even on nights when I returned home exhausted from back-to-back surgeries, I'd stay up with him running lines, encouraging him, reminding him that big breaks sometimes come slowly. I wanted to be the person who made that climb a little easier. I wanted to believe love could compensate for all the uncertainties of life. 2 months ago, it finally happened, or so I thought. He landed a small role in a full-length film, about 15 minutes of actual screen time. It wasn't much, but to him it was everything. His face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. I remember hugging him in the kitchen, the smell of burnt toast filling the air, because he'd forgotten it in the toaster, and thinking, "This is the beginning. We've made it." I let myself imagine a future where we shared victories instead of only battling disappointments. I wanted that for him. I wanted that for us. But 5 days ago, everything I believed shattered. There is no way to describe the feeling of being blindsided by the person you trust most. When he handed me the divorce papers, my mind couldn't process the words fast enough. I kept rereading his name, my name, the dates, the cold finality of it. I searched his face for a clue for something human, but all I saw was resolve. Detached, practiced resolve. Like he'd rehearsed this moment down to the last syllable. He said he didn't feel the same way anymore. That he needed to focus on his career now that opportunities were finally opening up. That our life, I represented baggage he could no longer carry. I remember the phrase vividly because it sliced through me like a scalpel. I'd spent 5 years pouring myself into our marriage, believing in him when he couldn't believe in himself, and somehow I had become a weight, an anchor dragging him down. My hands shook as I begged him to reconsider something I'm still ashamed of, if I'm honest. I'm not the type to plead. But heartbreak makes children of us all, and in that moment I would have said anything to keep the life I thought we shared. It didn't matter. He'd already packed most of his things. He walked out like the last 5 years had meant little more than a temporary arrangement. For the next 4 days I didn't go to work. I barely got out of bed. I moved through the hours like a ghost, drifting between disbelief and a grief, so sharp it made breathing hurt. I slept in short, jagged bursts, waking up disoriented, reaching instinctively for the man who no longer wanted me. Every corner of the house felt haunted, the couch, where we'd watched movies, the coffee mug he always reached for first, even the scent of his cologne lingering in the bathroom. Everything mocked me. I thought the worst was behind me, but pain, as I've learned, is rarely linear. Yesterday morning, when he called asking if I could drop off some of his formal clothes at his friend's place, I said yes. Before I could stop myself, a pathetic part of me still believed this was a chance to fix things. Maybe if I showed up present, supportive, familiar, he'd feel something. Maybe he'd soften. Maybe he'd remember the life we built together. I spent too long choosing what to wear, settling on a soft blue blouse he always said brought out my eyes. I hated myself for that. But heartbreak does strange things. As I drove over the city, looked almost unfamiliar, like it had shifted with my marriage, leaving me disoriented and small. When I reached his friend's house, the front door was slightly ajar. At first I assumed someone had stepped out momentarily, but then I heard their voices. His voice. Casual, unguarded, threaded with a confidence I hadn't heard in years. I approached quietly, clutching the bag of clothes, intending to knock. But then his friend asked a question that froze me in place. "Why'd you marry her if you didn't want to stay with her?" My breath stopped. Instinct told me to walk away. Dignity whispered that eavesdropping would only deepen the wound, but the ache in my chest, the confusion, the need for answers overruled everything. I stayed, silent, still, barely breathing as I pressed myself against the shadowed wall, listening to the man I had loved unravel the truth I had never been meant to hear. And that was the moment my world truly irrevocably split open. I didn't know a human heart could shatter twice in 1 week, but as I stood frozen outside that half-open door listening to my husband laugh about the very marriage I thought I was fighting to save, I felt something inside me splinter beyond repair. His laugh wasn't the gentle, embarrassed chuckle I'd heard 1,000 times when he forgot lines or burned dinner. It was sharp, cruel, a sound carved from arrogance and contempt. It didn't belong to the man I married. Then again, maybe it never had. The only reason I married her, he said each word, dripping with casual cruelty, was to get ahead. You know, contacts, stability, a comfortable life until something real came along. I felt the breath leave my lungs, a quiet exhale that carried 5 years of illusions with it. My fingers gripped the doorframe so tightly I thought I'd splinter the wood. His friend muttered something like, "Dude, that's messed up," but my husband just laughed again, dismissive, unbothered. Like the destruction of my trust was nothing more than a funny anecdote at a bar. He kept going. She was easy. Too easy, honestly. Wealthy, soft-hearted, eager to help. And you know her dad, big-name dental surgeon. One of his clients happens to be, well, let's just say, someone worth knowing in the industry. A nauseating clarity washed over me as the puzzle pieces rearranged themselves into a horrifying picture. All the small, strange details I'd brushed aside over the years suddenly snapped into focus the way he always asked about my father's events, the pressure to attend certain family dinners, the exaggerated interest he'd shown in a party he once claimed to hate small talk at. He hadn't been trying to support me. He'd been positioning himself. I mean, he continued, his voice taking on a smug tone that made my skin crawl. Pretending to love her wasn't that hard. She wanted to believe so badly. And hey, she was paying the bills. I got a place to stay, financial cushion, and eventually, a connection to someone who actually mattered. And then came the final blow. And of course, I cheated a bunch of times. But whatever, she never suspected a thing. Too busy saving lives to notice. My body went cold, not the kind of cold you get from fear, but the deeper, bone-deep chill of betrayal. My knees wobbled. I pressed a hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. I had suspected he was distant at times, but infidelity, repeated, casual. His voice carried no regret, no hesitation. He sounded proud. When he started talking about how he'd charmed my father's famous client at the anniversary party, bragging about how he sealed the deal, in under 30 minutes, I felt something in me go dark. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I didn't storm in screaming. I became still, terrifyingly still, the way a person becomes when pain transitions into something sharper and colder. I wasn't listening to my husband anymore. I was listening to a stranger. When his friend finally asked hesitantly, "What about the divorce? You sure she won't make this messy?" He snorted. "She's too naive for that. And if she tries, she has nothing on me anyway. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. I'll walk away with a clean slate." Those words were enough to ignite something fierce inside me. Without thinking, I stepped backward. One quiet step, then another. My body moved mechanically like I was being pulled away by some invisible force. I didn't remember walking back to my car, or opening the door, or gripping the steering wheel. Hard enough that my nails bit into my skin. The only thing I remember clearly is the shaking, a violent tremor that started in my shoulders and spread through my whole body like my nerves were short-circuiting. When I finally drove away, I didn't have a destination. I let the city blur around me. My mind felt like an overfilled container too swollen with devastation to hold anything else. I pulled into a quiet street, killed the engine, and let the silence swallow me whole. For the first time in my life, I felt anger so sharp it bordered on grief. Rage is a funny thing. It makes you feel alive and dead at the same time. By the time I got home, the sun had begun to set. The house felt different when I walked in, colder, emptier, like even the walls knew I'd been lied to for years. I set down the bag of clothes, walked to the bathroom, and stared at my reflection. My face looked unfamiliar. Eyes red, jaw clenched, expression hollow. I barely recognized the woman staring back. I tried meditating, breathing exercises, even pacing the hallway just to burn through the restlessness clawing at my chest. But nothing stopped the storm building inside me. I didn't trust myself to speak to him because I knew if I confronted him, I might do something I couldn't take back. So I did what I could. I breathed, I drank water, I washed my face. I sat on the floor of the living room staring at nothing for an hour. And then slowly something cold and clear settled inside me. I wanted justice, not revenge, not violence, just truth. I wanted him to face a consequence that couldn't be brushed aside with charm or lies, and I knew exactly how. I called my father. I kept my voice steady, pretending it was a routine conversation, then casually asked for the actor's number, the one who had helped my husband get that role. Dad didn't suspect anything. He gave me the number easily. And then I sat with it for a long time, staring at the digits glowing on my phone screen. My hand shook when I finally hit call. His assistant answered first, polite, professional, but uncertain. When the actor came on the line, I didn't even let him say hello before I started talking. The words poured out of me in one long, trembling stream: the betrayal, the manipulation, the exploitation of my father's connections, the years of pretense and cheating. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I simply told the truth. There was a heavy silence when I finished, and then he said quietly, "I'll take care of it." An hour later, my phone started buzzing. His name flashed on the screen again and again, frantic, desperate. I didn't pick up. I let every call go to voicemail. Eventually, the calls stopped. I slept better that night than I had in years. The next morning, the peace was shattered by pounding at my door. "Open up, Susan, please. I need to talk." His voice cracked in a way I'd never heard. Not sorrowful, panicked. I opened the door only because I wanted to see it. The consequence, the unraveling. He fell to his knees immediately. "You ruined everything," he sobbed. "You have no idea what you've done." "Oh, but I did." When I asked how the film was going, my tone dripping with sugar-coated mockery, he froze just for a moment before fury overtook him. He screamed, cursed, threatened, promised to take everything from me, to leave me on the street. And in that moment, I realized something profound. He had never loved me, not even a little. I told him to get out. He did, but not without venom whispered under his breath like a curse. And I had no idea then, absolutely none, that this was only the beginning of the nightmare. If there is one thing heartbreak teaches you, it's that peace can be fragile, so fragile that even silence becomes suspicious. For a few hours after I forced my husband out of my house, there was an eerie calm, the kind that feels less like relief and more like the moment before a storm. I tried to convince myself that maybe if the universe had even a shred of mercy, this would be the end of it. He'd lash out, scream, threaten, and then retreat into whatever shadowy corner wounded egos crawl into. But men like him don't let go. Not when control slips through their fingers. Not when someone they underestimated proves them wrong. The harassment began that night. The first call came at 1:12 a.m., a number I didn't recognize. Then another at 1:13. Then 1:15. Then 1:17. Each time I sent it to voicemail, my pulse quickened, the dread thickening in my throat like smoke. By 2 a.m., I had received 17 calls from different numbers. At first, I thought they were spam, wrong number, automated bots, or one of those scams that target exhausted night shift workers. But then, one of the numbers left a voicemail. I made the mistake of listening. "You can't run from talking to me forever." His voice, low, quiet, almost calm, which somehow made it 10 times more terrifying than the screaming that had echoed in my doorway earlier that day. That was the moment I realized this wasn't over, not even close. I blocked the numbers one by one, but they kept coming, as if he'd found some app that generated endless fake phone numbers, specifically designed to erode my sanity. By morning, my phone showed 73 missed calls. 73, all from different numbers. I turned the phone off and threw it onto my couch like it was burning me. For the first time in days, I contemplated calling the police. But I knew what would happen. They'd ask if he'd threatened me physically. They'd ask for proof. They'd say they can't do much until something happens. I didn't want something to happen. Instead, I tried to anchor myself to the one thing that still made sense: my career. Work. Purpose. The hospital had always been my refuge, the place where I could tuck my personal pain into a corner and focus on saving someone else's life. But when I walked in that morning, scrubs on badge, clipped to my pocket, it felt different, like I was a stranger in a place that used to feel like home. My coworkers noticed immediately. "Are you okay? You look pale. Did you even sleep?" I forced smiles, weak ones, but the truth was written all over my face. I didn't tell them anything, not yet. The words felt heavy in my throat. shame mixed with fear, and fear mixed with something even more dangerous, numbness. The hours passed in a blur. I stitched, diagnosed, consulted, reassured. I did everything the way I always had, but my mind wasn't there. Every vibration of my phone, even though it was turned off, echoed in my nerves like a phantom shock. I kept imagining him lurking somewhere, watching me, waiting for the right moment to ambush me. I told myself it was paranoia, and maybe some of it was, but paranoia doesn't grow in a vacuum. It grows in a person who's been betrayed, blindsided, harassed. Around lunchtime, I decided to change my number. I called the phone company and had them transfer everything to a new SIM. It took 20 minutes. When the new number finally activated, I felt a wave of relief so powerful I nearly cried right there in the staff lounge. But peace can be a dangerous illusion. 2 hours later, while I was reviewing patient charts, one of the hospital receptionists stopped me in the hall. "Dr. Anderson," she said, frowning. "Your husband called the main line asking to speak with you. He said it was urgent." My blood ran cold. I hadn't given him my new number. How had he found the hospital's? Of course. The directory. Public. Stupidly obvious. I thanked the receptionist and walked away quickly, my legs trembling beneath me. My heart wouldn't settle. I kept replaying the morning 73 calls, the voicemail. The controlled tone in his voice. I began to see shadows moving where there were none. Every time someone walked behind me, my body tensed, as if preparing for impact. After my shift ended, I stayed an extra hour just to avoid walking to the parking lot alone. I convinced myself it was logical, practical, but deep down, I knew it was fear whispering those steps into my shoes. When I finally drove home, I parked in my driveway and sat there gripping the wheel. The house felt wrong, unprotected, vulnerable. Every window felt like a pair of eyes staring back at me. I activated the security system for the first time since we'd moved in. He'd always insisted it was unnecessary. One of the perks of living in a safe neighborhood, he'd said. Now I didn't believe in safe neighborhoods, or safe people. My parents had been texting me for days, asking if everything was okay. I'd kept the truth from them, because admitting it would make everything too real. But that night, sitting alone in a house that felt smaller than it ever had, I finally typed out a message to my mother. "Mom, things aren't good. Can we talk tonight?" She called within seconds. Her voice cracked when she heard mine. "Susan, sweetheart, what's going on? You sound frightened." And I was. I told her everything. Not the full truth yet, not the overheard conversation, not the 5 years of manipulation, but enough for her to understand that my marriage was crumbling and my husband had become unpredictable. She begged me to come home, but I told her I needed a little time to gather myself. I hung up feeling both lighter and heavier at once. The next morning I woke to silence. No calls, no messages, not even blocked number attempts. It was unsettling, like the quiet had teeth. I deactivated my social media accounts that afternoon. Every single one. The urge wasn't dramatic. It was protective, instinctive. But even that didn't ease the tension building in my spine. Because silence doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes it means strategy. By the third day, the harassment stopped entirely. No calls, no messages, nothing. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt watched. And 2 days before the court hearing, when I thought maybe this nightmare was finally losing momentum, he made his move. He found me. Not through a phone, not online, not through anyone I knew. He found me in person. And everything that happened after that made me realize the harassment had only been the prelude. The real fear hadn't even begun. 2 days before the court hearing, I left the hospital later than usual. It had been one of those days where the air felt heavy, where every interaction seemed wrapped in a thin veil of tension I couldn't quite place. I told myself I was tired, that the last week had twisted my senses into overdrive. But deep down, in the part of the mind that recognizes danger before the rest of the body catches up, I felt something coming. The parking lot behind the hospital is usually bright, well-lit, almost welcoming. But that night, a few of the overhead lights were flickering, throwing long, shifting shadows across the pavement. I tightened my grip on my bag and walked faster, my pulse ticking higher with each step. The echo of my footsteps seemed louder than usual, like the concrete was trying to warn me. When my car came into view, I relaxed just slightly. I fumbled for my keys, glancing around one more time before unlocking the door. That's when it happened. The passenger door flew open. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't hear breathing. I didn't have time to react. 1 second, the seat beside me was empty, and the next my husband, my near ex-husband, was sliding into it, his movements swift and deliberate like he had practiced them. Before I could scream, before I could even draw in a full breath, he reached across the center console and slammed the locks. The doors clicked shut with a hard, final sound. A prison gate, a trap closing. My body froze. My mind didn't. Thoughts collided at once, panic rising fast and choking a tidal wave, threatening to swallow every rational instinct I had left. "What are you?" My voice came out strangled, shaking. "What are you doing? Get out! Get out of my car!" He didn't even look at me at first. He sat still staring straight ahead, breathing slightly harder than normal. His hands were clasped in his lap, white-knuckled, as if he were holding himself together by a thread. When he finally turned to face me, the expression he wore didn't belong to the man I once loved. It wasn't grief or anger or even desperation. It was something calmer, too calm. A controlled, eerie stillness that chilled my blood more than if he had been shouting. "I don't want to hurt you," he said quietly. "People who don't want to hurt you don't hide in your car." His eyes had lost their softness. What remained was focus obsession, a dangerous sort of conviction. "I just need one thing from you," he continued. "One call. That's it." My heart hammered so violently the sound drowned out his words for a moment. What I rasped, "What are you talking about?" "Call your dad's actor friend," he said, his tone disturbingly level. "Tell him you lied. Tell him to reinstate me. Fix what you broke." I stared at him, stunned. "You ambushed me in a parking lot to demand that." His jaw tightened. "You didn't give me a choice." "Yes, I did," I snapped. "I gave you a chance when I confronted you. I begged you to work things out. You wanted this divorce. You wanted your freedom." My voice cracked. "You threw away 5 years of my life, and now you want me to fix yours." He leaned closer, not aggressive, but purposeful. "You owe me Susan." The words hit me like a blow. "I owe you." My voice pitched higher, thin with disbelief. "After everything you did." "I did what I had to," he interrupted. "You're not innocent in this either." My breath caught. "What are you talking about?" "You lied to him," he hissed. "You ruined the one chance I had. You took everything from me. Everything." He wasn't talking like someone who had been caught in a lie. He was talking like someone rewriting reality to survive it. That terrified me more than anything. I needed a plan. Fast. My purse was on the floor by my feet, half tipped over. Inside was my pepper spray. I had been carrying it ever since the harassment began, more out of unease than genuine expectation. Now it felt like the only lifeline I had. "I can make the call," I whispered. His eyes narrowed. "Really?" I nodded slowly, careful not to move too much. "But my phone's in the purse. You threw it into the back last time, remember? I don't have it on me." The moment the words left my mouth, regret hit like a punch. I'd said too much, referenced a detail only he would recall. He could see right through me if I wasn't careful. A long, heavy silence stretched. Then fine. He unlocked the doors for only a second, just long enough to reach into the back seat and grab my purse. He shoved it into my hands. And that was his mistake. My fingers dove inside, instantly rummaging, searching my pulse, thundering in my ears. He started to say something, maybe a warning, maybe a threat, but he didn't finish. In one swift, instinctive motion, I lifted the pepper spray and pressed the trigger. It hissed like a serpent striking. He screamed a guttural, raw sound that tore through the small space of the car. His hands flew to his face as he writhed, chest heaving, choking out curses and broken pleas. The spray filled the air in a thick, burning cloud. It hit my own eyes, my throat, my skin. Agony seared through me instantly. Tears poured down my cheeks. I coughed, gasping, my vision dissolving into a distorted mess of color and light. My lungs burned. My nose stung. I could barely see him through the haze, but I could hear him thrashing, choking, blinded. I didn't think. I acted. My shaking hands slammed against the lock, then the door. I shoved it open, stumbled out, and circled around to his side. With the last of my strength, I pushed him out of the passenger seat. He hit the ground hard, screaming again, curling in on himself as the chemicals overwhelmed him. Gasping, half-blind, running on adrenaline more than clarity, I lunged back into the driver's seat, slammed the door, turned the engine, and peeled out of the lot. The car skidded slightly, tires screeching. My hands trembling so fiercely the steering wheel vibrated beneath my grip. But I couldn't drive far. I couldn't see. The world outside was a smear of orange light and blue shadows. My eyes burned like acid. I fought to keep the car straight long enough to pull over safely. When I finally did, I ripped the door open and stumbled onto the curb, gulping fresh air, tears streaming uncontrollably. A cab pulled up beside me a moment later, its headlights catching my trembling form. The driver looked at me, really looked, and saw everything. "Miss, you're in trouble," he said. "Get in. I'm taking you to the police." I didn't argue. I didn't have the strength to argue. I slid into the back seat, body trembling violently. The cab door shut. And for the first time since he entered my car, I felt a flicker of something that had been missing for weeks. Safety, or the closest thing to it. The police station was colder than I expected, not physically, but emotionally. A place where people arrived shaken, desperate, bruised, terrified. A place where stories weren't always believed the first time they were told. But the moment the cab driver guided me inside, one hand, lightly steadying my arm as if I might collapse, I felt a strange sense of belonging. Like this was where the story of my marriage was always meant to end, not in a therapist's office, not in a courtroom, but in a place built to hold the aftermath of violence. I was still coughing, eyes watering from the pepper spray, my breath shallow and uneven. A female officer came toward me immediately, her expression shifting from routine professionalism to alarm as soon as she saw my swollen eyes and trembling hands. "What happened?" she asked gently. I tried to speak, but my throat burned too much. The cab driver stepped in. Her husband ambushed her in the parking lot, locked her in her own car. She defended herself and escaped. The officer's jaw set. She nodded and led me toward a small room with a metal table, a pitcher of water, and fluorescent lights that hummed faintly, like they were tired of listening to people confess their worst moments. She handed me tissues. "Start from the beginning," she said. So I did. For the first time, I told every detail without softening the edges. I described the divorce, the sudden shift in his personality, the harassment, the 70-plus calls, the stalking silence that followed, and finally, the attack. My voice wavered at times, trembling as I relived the panic of being trapped, the terror of his calmness, the chaos of the pepper spray exploding between us. When I finished, the officer exhaled slowly as though she had been holding her breath with me. "We'll send someone to locate him immediately," she said. "The pepper spray will make it difficult for him to flee far." The words brought a small flicker of relief, but not enough to steady me fully. Trauma lingers like residue, sticky, stubborn, impossible to wash off with a single declaration of safety. I stayed at the station for hours. They took my statement, photographed the redness in my eyes, asked follow-up questions, and assured me repeatedly that I had done the right thing. When they finally told me he'd been found still on the ground near the parking lot, half blind and disoriented, I felt something deep inside my chest unclench for the first time in days. He wasn't coming after me tonight. A uniformed officer dropped me off at my parents' house shortly after midnight. My mother opened the door before I even reached the porch light. She must have been watching from the window, pacing, worrying the way mothers do when their child's voice cracks during a phone call. Her arms wrapped around me instantly. "My baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My God, what did he do to you?" I didn't have the strength to answer. My father appeared behind her, his expression thunderous. I had never seen him look so murderous. Not when I failed my first exam in college and blamed myself. Not when a patient's family shouted at me for something beyond my control. Never like this. He didn't speak. He simply placed a large, steady hand on my shoulder as though anchoring me back to the earth. In that moment, I realized something. Sometimes protection is quiet. Sometimes it's not about shielded fists or loud promises. Sometimes it's simply standing beside someone and refusing to move. That night, I slept in my childhood bedroom, the one with faded lavender walls, and a window overlooking the magnolia tree I used to climb. My mother left the nightlight on, something I hadn't needed since I was 7, but the truth is, I needed it now. Darkness wasn't comfort anymore. Darkness was a place where he appeared beside me in a car without a sound. Over the next few days, the legal machinery moved faster than I expected. The attack, the prior harassment, the pepper spray injuries, everything painted a clear picture of a man unraveling violently. He was charged with assault, attempted coercion, harassment, and violating the conditions of an ongoing divorce. His public defender argued he was emotionally distressed, but the judge didn't seem impressed. I attended one of the hearings, sitting stiffly beside my parents, avoiding my husband's swollen, red-eyed face as he scanned the courtroom, searching for sympathy. He found none. The sentence came quickly, 3 months in county jail and a significant fine. Not as long as I might have liked, not as long as he deserved, but long enough to sever whatever remaining illusions I had about him being capable of growth or regret. The divorce finalized shortly after. No alimony, no shared assets, nothing binding us anymore except the remnants of a memory I no longer wish to hold. I sold the house the following week. I didn't tell him, of course. He didn't need to know where I lived, where I breathed, where I slept. I sold my car too, not because it was uncomfortable, but because I couldn't sit behind that wheel without feeling phantom fingers locking the doors again. I moved into a small, modern apartment near my parents' home for temporary safety while I transitioned to a new hospital. My mother insisted I stay with them until the move was complete. For once in my fiercely independent life, I didn't protest. Their home was warm, structured, steady, the opposite of everything my marriage had become. Therapy became a weekly ritual. The first session was brutal. The therapist asked me to recount everything from the beginning, and by the time I reached the ambush in the parking lot, my hands were shaking so badly that she had to pause the session. She told me trauma doesn't fade quickly, that even when wounds scab over, they can reopen unexpectedly. That fear can be a leftover of love, twisted but real. Your mind is trying to protect you, she said gently. It replays what hurt you so it can learn to avoid it. I nodded, but I didn't want to avoid anything. I wanted to understand how the man I married, the man I once believed was good, had become this stranger capable of cruelty. But some questions don't have answers. Nights were the hardest. I always fell asleep eventually, exhaustion dragging me under like a tide. But I woke up often sometimes from nightmares, where he grabbed my wrist, other times from phantom ringing that reminded me of those 70 endless calls. But slowly, incrementally, the fear loosened its grip. My parents kept the house warm, dinner on the table, soft conversations flowing around me like a balm. One morning, sitting by the kitchen window with a cup of warm tea, I realized something profound. For the first time in months, maybe years, my shoulders weren't clenched. My chest wasn't tight. The air didn't feel dangerous. It felt breathable. Healing isn't a switch you flip. It's a slow, uneven climb through the rubble of what you survived. But I was climbing, one day at a time. And as I sit here now, finally free, finally safe, I understand something I didn't before. Love didn't break me. He did. And I walked away anyway. I survived him. I will survive the memories too.